It's the Farmer to Farmer podcast, episode 30, and this is your host, Chris Blanchard. For more than 20 years, Mushroom Mountain's Tradd Cotter has been working to think like a mushroom as he worked to build a business based on his mycological adventures. Since 1996, South Carolina's Mushroom Mountain has produced edible mushrooms and served as a laboratory for Tradd's explorations into the use of mushrooms for everything from mycoremediation to personalized antibiotics. Tradd and I explore low-tech and no-tech strategies for growing mushrooms, including the fundamentals of mushroom production and strategies for fitting mushrooms into a vegetable operation. We also get into the psychology and physiology of the fungal kingdom. Tradd is a true mushroom evangelist, and this episode provides some great insights into the exciting potential of mushrooms for a farm and for the planet. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope you enjoy it just as much as I have. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is brought to you by Vermont Compost, founded by organic crop growing professionals committed to meeting the need for high quality composts and compost-based living soil mixes for certified organic plant production. VermontCompost.com. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is brought to you by Farmigo CSA Management Software, providing the tools you need to manage your CSA business. Farmigo CSA Management Software has a customizable management system to meet your farm's specific needs. CSAManagementSoftware.com. Tradd Cotter, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Chris. Glad to be here.
You were talking at one of the conferences that I attended out in North Carolina this year. And I was, I was like, oh yeah, it was snowing. And I was like, oh, it's just, it's going to be another workshop about mushrooms. In fact, I think you were punting for somebody that didn't show up. Mm-hmm. And you put up this photograph of this bright pink oyster mushroom. Mm-hmm. And I sat up straight and started paying attention at that point. Can you tell us how do pink mushrooms fit into what's going on now at Mushroom Mountain?
Well, we're Mushroom Mountain's growing at the point, it's mushrooming, right? There's a lot of cheap jokes coming up, and
we like cheap jokes.
Oh yeah, they're sustainable. They're green. You can recycle them. Some you got to compost, but good cheap jokes are recyclable.
Well, and we're vegetable farmers, so let us make some cheap jokes.
Yeah,
and because you just can't beat them.
No. BEET. And so pink mushrooms, we have over 200 mushroom strains in our library, mushroom species, and the pink oyster is one of them. And it's one of those that probably would make you kind of wake up during a lecture, because it's just it doesn't look real. And some people will say, well, how did you make that mushroom that way or that color? I'm like, no, that's pretty much the species. It's genetically predisposition to turn that color, and that's its genetics. It's a wonderful mushroom that tastes kind of like seafood. And we like to saute it and make chowder out of it, put it in potato, like a potato cream soup. It's just wonderful. And it's one of the easiest mushrooms to grow. So if anybody listening wants to grow mushrooms, the whole oyster mushroom class is super easy. The pink one fruits in like 10 days from the minute you mix stuff together. So if you have a problem with patience and waiting, the pink oyster mushroom is definitely the one to get. And it's a big hit around Valentine's Day and Mother's Day too.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like the Valentine's Day, the mushrooms. That would be a true love sort of a gift there.
Well, I have a cheap shot for Valentine's Day. Anyone who's listening, because I didn't have any ideas like most guys for Valentine's Day a couple of years ago. And so I found for Olga, and my wife, Olga, she doesn't like cut flowers, so I always try to get her living plants. Well, one year I found this wreath that was shaped like a heart. There's a wheat straw wreath that they sell those at hobby stores. And I was thinking, I'm like, wow, oyster mushrooms grow on straw, and here's a heart-shaped wreath. So I hid it from her, and I soaked it in the hot water back in January one year, and then soaked in the hot water, then added the pink oyster mushroom spawn. And I put it in the bag, and I hid it in the lab. And then right before Valentine's Day, I tried to time it perfectly. It was only like a day or two off. I hung it up in the greenhouse, and it was a heart-shaped wreath with pink oyster mushrooms growing all over it. It was absolutely beautiful.
I love
Yeah, that was the bottom of the barrel.
Well, that's great. It actually feels like the top of the barrel to me. Yeah. That's really, Tradd, I mean, this is what really interests me about your business is it's not just about farming mushrooms, although I think you're doing that as well. But it's this bigger picture. You mentioned 200 strains that you have in your lab, and lab's not exactly something that we're used to thinking about when we think about organic farms. So can you tell us a little bit about mushroom? I keep wanting to say Magic Mountain mushrooms, but I know that I'm not supposed to do that. It's just Mushroom Mountain. Can you tell us about Mushroom Mountain? What exactly do you guys do out there?
That's the problem with trying to describe us at the moment. Classically, I was trained in mushroom cultivation, and right now we've just moved to a new facility. We're in the process of buying this property, and it has 42,000 square feet of warehouse space. And it's a lot. I mean, this is a big undertaking. Now, I think I'm less passionate about just churning out and cranking out mushroom production. Anybody can do that. I'm fascinated with the research. But we need to sell mushrooms to pay for the research. So currently we're producing about 300 pounds of mushrooms a week, and we're scaling up to do about 600 pounds by, I think, 2 weeks from now. And then 3 weeks later than that, we're up to 2,000 pounds a week. And
holy cow.
How? Well, going back to the laboratory, the lab is like, it's a sterile, super sterile room. Olga and I spent a lot of money on it to do it right. And it's a sterile air room, and you go in there with scrubs, and then all you do is just to make that many mushrooms, think of it like a bread culture. You can just keep dividing it and kneading in fresh flour and water, and you just keep expanding it. So in the lab, all we do is feed the mushrooms. And as long as you're feeding a culture, it gets bigger and bigger, and it never fruits. So what we do is just in these bags and these sterilized bags and jars and everything, we expand the culture as much as we can, as much as we want, and then we make the decision to send it to the fruiting room, and it never comes back. So inside this little nursery, you could call it, in the lab is where we maintain the cultures. We keep them in the fridge. Whenever we need them, we pull them out, and then we'll just expand it. And honestly, if you told me, like right now, to grow as many oyster mushrooms as I could, theoretically, from one Petri plate that I have in the lab, if I pulled it out today and I expanded it as much as I could, in 11 weeks, I could grow 1 million pounds of mushrooms a week.
That's crazy. That's like, that's like these old stories about how an E. coli bacteria multiplying could take over the whole world in like a week. I mean, really?
Yeah, that's true. And so my job is actually throttling that. We don't need 1 million pounds a week. I mean, I wish I could sell that much, but I think our goal is to try to even though we have this facility now, and my goal is to make ends meet and to use some of that cash to kind of keep it circular. In other words, to pay for the research, to hire employees and students to work here. I see this place, and a lot of other people do too. These are other people's words, like a mushroom like a Google campus for fungi. We want, and I want to explore the fungal kingdom like no one else has ever done. And, Google did that with the internet, and Apple's done that with computers, but I want Mushroom Mountain to be the mushroom campus on the planet. And we have the facility now. I mean, we've got the space to make it happen. And, we're fruiting all these wonderful mushrooms out for the area markets, and we've got all this amazing research that's going on here. And I think that's what gets me excited every morning is not only just walking into the fruiting room, that never gets old. I mean, I've been doing this for 22 years, and walking into the fruiting room is always it's just amazing because they grow so fast. They double in size every day, sometimes triple. And plants don't do that. No way. And so it never gets monotonous. I think, I'm not picking on the vegetable farmers, but they might understand. You just plant a row of tomatoes or corn or something like that, and it's just like an act. You just kind of do it, and then you pick your fruit. But with mushrooms, it's kind of a bonding experience because when you grow mushrooms, you take it from this culture, and then you watch it colonize something, and then it fruits. So in a way, in a strange way, you kind of bond with the fungi because it happens so fast. So That's what I like to do here.
And it's something you've talked about and written about. And I certainly got the sense when I watched you speak about mushrooms was that you're able to kind of, I want to say, get inside the mushroom's head. I mean, you actually have an article called How I Learned to Think Like a Mushroom. And it's really apparent that you get this kingdom at a really deep level, that it really resonates with you.
Yeah. And I started college and then stopped for a while and then had to go back to finish a degree in microbiology. And when I came back to school, I was older. I was in my late 30s, and I talked to this advisor, and he said they're mostly bacteriology, all bacteria. And this advisor said, listen, the best way to study bacteria is to think like a bacteria. And I said, well, coincidence, because I grow mushrooms and I think like a mushroom. So it was kind of like the peanut butter and the chocolate, colliding, and everything started to click, and, fungi and bacteria and all these other kingdoms. So when you kind of put yourself inside this organism, which is very animal-like, and fungi are, they create heat, they produce carbon dioxide, and they sweat water, and they use enzymes to digest, and that's an animal turned inside out. Their stomachs are on the outside. So it's not very difficult to kind of put yourself in that position of being consuming things and colonizing. Once mushrooms colonize their territory, they mine the resources. Doesn't it sound human-like? Sounds
very familiar.
Yeah, they colonize, they attack, they're predatory, they're opportunistic, and I don't think it's very difficult for me, unless I'm messed up in the head. Where they're somewhat militant, and I love thinking like a fungus, because every mushroom that we meet or we culture, as I like to say, that we pull from the woods, and we'll, clone them or culture them so we can grow more. Everyone's different. Every single species and even strain is different. So I have to get to know it. I have to feed it things in the lab. I have to, it's like inviting people over to dinner that you don't know. You know how frustrating that is. Is that person, do they eat meat? Is it a vegetarian? Fungi are kind of the same way. So I just set up these buffets in the lab, and I just kind of see what they do. And then I try to use some intuition and say, well, now that I know that, I think it can do this, and that really does work. And I think that's one of those things I write about in the book, is trying to get inside of that chemical consciousness that fungi use, because they do make decisions. And it's just short, it's one chapter short of being called Mushroom Psychology, which I did write about. We deleted that chapter when we edited the book. There was a chapter on mushroom psychology. I may put it back in.
I think you should put it back in just for the title alone.
Oh yeah. I think it's cool.
And so I've always been fascinated with the world of mushrooms. I mean, it's always something that felt like another step beyond what I've done as a vegetable farmer. But I've always also been a little bit intimidated by I think it's exactly what you said. It's they're not vegetables. They're not animals. It's this weird little thing that's kind of off there on its own. How does somebody get started in mushroom farming? I mean, how would somebody who's got a vegetable operation and says, I'd like to add a little bit of diversity. I'd like to have something that I'm able to produce in a more stable environment. How would somebody jump into this?
Well, training wheels mushrooms first, and I write about it a lot. At the kind of the beginning chapters of the book, I see there's 30 mushroom species in this book I talk about, but the range of difficulty varies. And the thing about I guess the human psyche right now is nobody wants failure, and everybody's wants the easy button. And you got to pick those mushroom strains like oyster mushrooms on straw or agricultural waste. Well, see right there, that's an in for farmers who are already growing crops that might want to sun dry their vegetation. And I ask this all the time in crowds at lectures. I say, well, who are farmers here? And a bunch of hands go up. And I'm like, well, who grows corn and squash? And a bunch of hands go up. And I'm like, well, what do you do with the waste at the end of the year? And everyone says, well, we just compost it. And I look at them and I say, well, what do mushrooms do? After this is later on, and they're like, well, they compost, don't they? So there's an opportunity to take some of that waste, sun dry it, and then, put it in some hot water, mix some mushroom culture in, and grow oyster mushrooms on the waste that farmers are producing. And that's a nice circular system that I think every farmer should agree and try is to just get some oyster mushroom spawn, sun dry some of your vegetation this fall, and shred it up, and then soak it in hot water for 2 hours, and add your oyster spawn and see what happens. So that's the easy way in.
So you're talking about you're talking about vegetable waste, not just. I always think of like oyster mushrooms and oat straw as going together. Sure. But I don't grow oats. I grow tomatoes and carrots. So
Mm-hmm.
if I took my carrot tops and spread them out on a concrete pad, let them dry to a crisp, and soaked them and sterilized them and put mushroom spawn on them, I get mushrooms out of that?
You could, and the biggest growing mushrooms is like cooking. Okay, so the carbon to nitrogen ratio is one thing you want to be aware of. So you might just have to mix in different things and find the right formula, but it's generally 12-1 or 10-1 carbon to nitrogen. Okay, so yes, you could grow it on the carrot tops or the squash waste and things like that. But it just needs to be some super sun-dried and crispy like we talked about. Otherwise, the bacteria will win. No green foliage.
And that's another thing that I've always found a little bit intimidating about mushrooms is, you're talking about having a lab. Now, I don't think, your average farmer doesn't have that.
No.
So it really is a process of sterilizing outside of the lab.
Yeah, it's pasteurization at that point. And that's what oyster mushrooms are extremely lenient and selective for that. They prefer to grow in that environment, so it's very easy for farmers to do that. Open air inoculations. We still do it here. Even at our place, we boil stuff in barrels, we pull it out, and we spawn it and bag it. And we get really, really good luck, very low contamination rates. And that should tell everybody that you don't need anything that's super high tech. And we have the high tech machinery here. It's just because of the lab and the research we do. I write a lot about low tech and no tech spawn production techniques. How to clone mushrooms with cardboard, how to try to perpetuate that spawn. If you do buy spawn, how can you make it go further? That's the economics of it. I produce spawn, and I'm trying to teach people how to, the best way to use it, as if it were me buying the spawn, right? Thinking that of course I'm going to try to, perpetuate it or seed save in a way where I don't have to buy that again. And in a sixth sense, I'm trying to put myself out of the spawn business by teaching that. But I want more people to learn how to grow their mushrooms. We're at the point where we're doing a lot of other things. And so I love the mushroom business and the spawn business, but I really want people to learn how to grow their own mushrooms. And it's so much easier than growing tomatoes. Anybody that's listening, good grief. They are easy.
So walk me through, let's take oyster mushrooms. So if I decided tomorrow that I was going to become an oyster mushroom farmer,
sure.
What are the steps involved in actually growing an oyster mushroom from start to finish?
Okay. Well, first you need to have a feedstock. Oyster mushrooms eat, agricultural waste, like we talked about. Mostly carbons. They use a little bit of nitrogen. Like I said, 10-1, 12-1 carbon to nitrogen. So you have that. Spawn is another thing. So you just need some spawn. And what I would do is start some small trials. In other words, do maybe a couple bags a week and mix the spawn with the cooked. You take your shredded agricultural waste, and all you do is dunk it in hot water, like 165, pasteurized, for 2 hours. Pull it out, let it cool, and you mix the spawn in, and you put it into bags or containers, and poke some holes, and then they come out of the holes in probably as little as 2 weeks, sometimes 3 or 4 weeks. So within a month, you're going to get results.
And you're not talking about highly controlled environments. I mean, this isn't something that I'm doing in a perfectly 68-degree room or something like that.
No, and I've grown in greenhouses before with shade. Mushrooms don't like intense, direct, bright light. They prefer 85 to 90% shade. But you can cultivate them in greenhouses. Ideally, a room or a garage or spare place that is essentially can be made into a humidity tent. That's really the challenging part, is just maintaining that high humidity. And when you really think about it, that's not a challenge. You just put plastic up. I've even seen people in warehouses put a greenhouse inside of a warehouse. The little Quonset ribs, and just hook it up. And mushrooms need fresh air. Remember I said they create carbon dioxide. They need fresh air. They need high humidity, and they actually need light. We use LED lights here, all LEDs, because they're low energy, but fluorescent lights work, or natural diffuse sunlight. So they really don't need much. I mean, you could probably start a small, for the market, let's say 30 pounds to 50 pounds a week with less than a half a day's worth of work. You could boil a barrel full of this stuff and then buy a bag of spawn, mix it up, and each bag of spawn should produce 30 to 40 pounds of mushrooms in, over the course of a couple weeks, because they flush several times. But if you're producing every week, that's the goal, is to just grow a little bit every week, and you will get consistent results, because it takes a couple weeks for them to colonize. Then they'll fruit. They'll fruit once, they'll rest for a couple weeks, and then they'll fruit again, typically half the yield of the first flush, and then they'll rest a couple weeks, and then they'll flush again, that half of the second flush. So I do all this mushroom math and figure out that, hey, one little bag of shredded straw with spawn in it will produce about, 1 3/4 pounds per bag. And when you do the economics, it only costs me $1 to make that bag, and I'm producing almost 2 pounds of mushrooms worth $16 to $20. So that's what works. I know it has to work economically at the same time, but it really does. And oyster mushrooms are the one to start with.
And it sounds like a pretty low labor proposition.
It is. It just for a few hours a week, because unless you're standing there or paying someone to watch the water heat up, it's super cheap. It's you light the barrel, you walk away for 2 hours. You shred and dunk it, you walk away for 2 hours, and then you come back, you pull it out. So overall, I'm thinking maybe the bagging takes the longest. It really isn't that bad. Like say just a couple of hours a week could yield 30 to 40 pounds of mushrooms, $10 a pound. That's really good math.
I guess I would have thought that it would be a lot more intense to get into. Why isn't everybody growing mushrooms?
I think not many people know, or just they think it's more complicated. It's really not that bad, or they think you need a lot of space. We teach the bag method. I've got some bucket designs in the book that are stackable, so you need very little space. I just don't think people really know about it or realize how easy it is. But once they start, our spawn business has grown tremendously in the past year or two, and I think it just has to do with education. This information is getting out. It's not as complicated anymore. There's a lot of experimentation going on, and people are posting, all over the internet, how to grow this, how to do that. So I think it's, intellectual, sharing of information.
And it seems like something that would be, like you said, pretty compatible with other operations, because it's not like you've got these big peak labor loads at at one time of the year. It's not like, you don't have calving season or anything like that with mushrooms.
No, I know. I'm glad I don't. Yeah, we don't have to. Yeah, we don't have to castrate mushrooms or do anything. We just we go in there, we pick them, and there's no PETA laws yet. But I think it's a great opportunity, and when you think about a lot of downtime, and farmers are like accountants during tax season. I mean, we have friends who are farmers. We don't talk to them. Everybody's busy. But in the fall and in the winter, things slow down. And if those farmers were to stockpile, let's say, their biomass, let it sun dry, and that gives them the off season to possibly, supplement their income, sell to some restaurants. But they grow so fast if you stockpile the biomass and start growing again during the season, and you can take fresh mushrooms to sell right next to your tomatoes and peppers at the market. And that's what we do. When we go to the market down here in Greenville, we sell out. It starts at 8, and we're sold out by 10:30.
Wow.
And we take, oh my God, I can't remember. We take like 50 to 80 pounds sometimes down there. And it's just one market, one street market. So I think it's a good opportunity, and it's diversity. It's making good use of your organic material. And at the very end, the icing on the cake is that you get a beautiful compost at the end of this, because we worm compost the mushroom mycelium, the leftover blocks in the bags. We slice them open and then compost them with worms, and we get this beautiful, rich worm casting soil at the end. Because worms love fungi. I tell people, even if you don't like mushrooms, and trust me, some of my family doesn't. And
some of your family's probably kind of sick of them.
Yeah, I pushed it on them. I'm pretty pushy, but I say, even if you don't like mushrooms, if you grow mushrooms like in the garden, like oyster mushrooms are great on straw. We talked about that. The second one, the training wheels, is King Stropharia in the garden. So you can actually grow this one on wood chips or straw in the garden, like in the rows around the plants. And it fruits all up underneath the shady part of the plants, because you're watering in the summer. It fruits the same year. But what that mushroom does, the King Stropharia, it's not only edible and good, is it attracts worms from as far as 10 feet away. So
really,
it's an alcohol called octanol, and they will actually vector in worms from up to 10 feet away, like a shark can smell blood. And then they come in, they eat the mycelium which is the fungus in the wood chips, and then it deposits the worm castings right where the plants are. So you have this fungus there, breaking down the wood chips, making available sugars, and then they invite the worms to the party. Then the worms deposit the castings right where your plants are. So your plants get fertilized for free. So it's a nice combination for anybody who want to add mushrooms to your garden, even if you don't eat them. Put them there.
Well, it's something I see a lot happening in the permaculture movement right now, is that everything that they put out seems to have been inoculated with some sort of a fungus. Mm-hmm. If they're putting a mulch on a row of trees or something like that, they're always taking the time to mix in those cultures, mix in the mycelium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's saprophytes, which are mushrooms that eat dead material. Okay, like King Stropharia and oyster mushrooms and shiitake, those are all eat dead material. Then there's others that are called mycoremediation, and those grow on the roots. So if you use the two together, you really don't need fertilizer. And that's what's killing our water quality in the U.S. is fertilizer and pesticides. So if you've got this beneficial fungi that bond to the plant for life, and you do it, you introduce this fungus to them as a seed, or when they're very small, it essentially bonds to the roots. It threads into the root system, and the plant rewards that fungus with carbon and sugar. And in return, the fungus gives the plant nitrogen and phosphate that it goes out and mines in the soil. And it'll just, it'll give up those plant metabolites, up to 80% of a plant's energy that it uses from the sun goes into metabolites in the roots to feed the fungi and the bacteria. So we got to take care of the roots of our plants. And, adding fungi to the roots at a very young age, seed to seedlings means you don't have to use as much. So it's intelligent to use mycorrhizae very sparingly at a young age. Plant them up on your vegetables, your annuals, fruit trees, and then add your Kingstoferia around the wood chips on top, and everything works synergistically. It's a good system.
What other mushrooms are good for people to get started with?
The one we've left out, people are waiting on, is shiitake mushrooms are easy. There's a reason that they were one of the first to be grown on logs. They are resilient. They can kind of go, they can dry out a little bit on the logs, rehydrate, and keep growing. And they're an omnivore for hardwood, so they can grow on, oak, maple, cherry, beech, ash, elm, poplar, even some of the fruit trees. And they're very meaty. They're very high in protein, and they dry and rehydrate well. So that's another reason to grow them. If you grow them in abundance or too many, that you can overproduce and dry and store those through the winter. Shiitake mushrooms are wonderful, and the whole mushroom, even though the stem is somewhat fibrous, we'll cut and cook the caps because they're nice and tender, but the stems are kind of rubbery and fibrous, and we'll dry those so they're hard as a rock, and then we'll put those in a blender and make a flour out of them, and we can use that as a breading. Oh my gosh, it's good.
I actually came home from that conference in North Carolina and tried that. It was really something.
Yeah, and when we tell that story at the market, and I like to interact, and especially me and our employees, we like to talk to people coming up to the booth and offer recipe ideas, because that's part of selling. And the mushroom is to get the consumers to know, how do I use this? People come up and they see shiitakes and golden oyster and lobster mushroom and all these different things, and they've never had them before. And there's a right and a wrong way to cook, just about anything. So we try to offer that face-to-face, just absolutely free consult. Like, oh my gosh, you got to try this with a king oyster with butter and a little garlic, and it tastes like scallops. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And they come back the next week and they're like, you were not kidding. I got to have more. So it's about education, how to use these mushrooms. Will open up a whole new window or world for people who want to try something new. My area, I'm in the conservative South.
Yeah, you're not like in prime organic hippie farmer land down there, are you?
No, not really. I think I'm surrounded by people with torches right now. If the line goes dead, come and get me. But no, Greenville is a high European demographic because of the BMW plant and Boeing, and there's a lot of Michelin. There's a lot of engineers, and Europeans are more mushroom savvy than Americans. Case closed. But Americans are catching up. There's a lot more mushroom clubs around. The North American Mycological Association. If you look up that online, you'll find a club near you, and it's a great idea if you're growing mushrooms. Learn about the ones in the woods too. Those are free. You can go out and collect, and I certify for DHEC in the state, the Department of Health, for wild permits for the state. It's the law. A lot of states don't have it, and a lot of other states have mushroom poisonings. But check with your local state regulations, and if you need a permitting process, you just let me know, because we might go to other states with it. But there's a lot of food out there, chanterelles. I could go out and pick 40 to 60 pounds of chanterelles in a day. Well, hell, they're $20 a pound. That's one of the first mushrooms I ever identified when I was 20 years old, was a chanterelle, because I was sent out into the woods and the chefs needed them. I learned that one first, and now I'm teaching classes on it, just learning one at a time. So I think pairing a little bit of mushroom cultivation with some wild harvesting and learning some basic ID is a great, well-rounded approach for any farmer. That, a lot of farmers listening probably have a wooded area they're not using, Put Put some logs out there. Put some straw kits out there. You can hang them from trees in the winter and grow oyster mushrooms outside. And then you can also harvest mushrooms from the woods that are just growing there naturally.
Now that would work in the South where it doesn't get extremely cold in the wintertime, right? I don't want to put my oyster mushrooms outdoors here in southern Wisconsin. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, but there are cold strains. Now there's winter cold strains that'll fruit almost all the way, down into the freezing range. So you just have to pick your times. Maybe early, mid-spring, the interface season, so spring and fall. And then you can move, if you make a little cold frame or something where you can just maintain 50 degrees or 45 degrees, just put a little bit of insulation or supplemental heat. You don't have to get it up to 75 and 80, like pink oyster mushrooms you can just pick a different strain at the different time of year. And then when the warm season comes back around, then you just change strains. You get a different tropical strain of spawn, and you kind of grow with the seasons.
Interesting. I guess I don't really think of that. Yeah. I mean, it makes so much sense. I wouldn't have thought from the outside about changing the strains of mushrooms throughout the season. I mean, you do that with lettuce. I don't know why I wouldn't have thought of doing it with mushrooms. Maybe just not really thinking about all of the different strains, and that there would be things that are regionally adapted to different heat and humidity regimes.
Yeah, and we even do that as a large commercial, I wouldn't say we're large, Kennett Square, and there's some very large monopolistic mushroom farms in the U.S., but I still consider ourselves small, even though we have a lot of things going on. We've got a lot of property, a lot of building space. We're still trying to stay a little bit smaller and just do a little bit more diversity, like low numbers. So we're kind of a mid-range farm here, and we grow seasonally, and that's something the big people don't do. And we rotate the strains because I think it's intelligent, and also it helps with the pocketbook because, we have every single light in this entire facility's LED, and we have solar panels to hook up. So we're trying to get that off the grid. But
right.
Economically, when you if you try to grow tropical mushrooms, even down here, not even Wisconsin, but it gets into the teens and 20s. Well, mushrooms need fresh air. So where does the fresh air come from? Outside. Right. You're going to pump 20-degree temperature into a fruiting room that wants to be 75 to 80. It doesn't work. So we will transition out, and we're kind of doing it now. And even for our spawn business, we offer golden and pink oyster and warm blue, and then we start to tell people, listen, we're going to stop producing the spawn in a month or two, and we'll pick it back up in April, because it makes more sense to do that. And then we'll switch to elm oyster, which is a cool season, and brown cool season, and then cold blue. So we can turn the AC off. I use very little AC anymore. But to get around all this, what we learned in our greenhouse on a small scale, and this is a lesson for any beginner farmers, is that, don't go big too quick. Learn the subtlety of these mushrooms because they grow so fast. You can be successful really fast, or you can fail really fast. And,
right.
And what we've done is, a couple of years ago, Olga and I had a small greenhouse, and we tried to grow mushrooms in the winter. Horrible disaster, because it was dropping down to the teens, and nothing was fruiting. So then we decided to put in a propane heater. Okay. We went through I think 100-pound cylinder of propane in a week, and economically it didn't make sense. So we just never filled it back up. And Olga and I were talking, we're walking around the greenhouse. I'm like, how are we going to do this? We really need to grow mushrooms. And then it was just like a light bulb went off. I'm like, hello, plants make oxygen, don't they? Everybody knows that. So right. We started adding a lot of plants to the greenhouse, even though we weren't really growing them for the market. We were growing them for their oxygen producing capability. So we added a ton of really cool, cold hardy plants to our greenhouse. And then we can instead of bringing in fresh air that was 20 degrees, we could put in a little space heater, tiny one, and we would shut the door, and we wouldn't have to bring in fresh air at all. So it's almost like a little lunar module. You've got your plants in there, you've got your fungi, and everything's offsetting the gases. And that's how we have it now. And it's been several years, and people come to our farm, and they're like, what's with all the plants? And I said, well, they look nice, don't they? And they're like, yeah. They're like, yeah. I'm like, but let's think about it. And someone says, they're making oxygen. I'm like, of course. And I said, wouldn't you prefer plants in an enclosed environment? It's funny. And it was just so simple. And I like the idea of enclosed environments, trying to get our farm off the grid. We do have an initiative here to zero waste and getting totally off the grid here, within a year, I would say. We're getting close. And, trying to get fresh oxygen. Mushrooms need air, so just be aware of that. Okay. If you're growing, some people say, well, I want to grow in a basement. I said, that's fine, but just understand that if you put a lot of mushrooms in a basement, carbon dioxide is heavier than oxygen, so it's going to pool. And if you can visualize carbon dioxide as a liquid, you're basically going to be walking down into pure CO2, right, over your head.
Right.
So you need to exhaust it. And they're like, oh, gosh, I can't do that. I was like, well, why don't you just add some ferns, some house plants in there? And everybody, a lot of people say, well, I never thought of that. And it's very simple. And it adds a lot of life to the room. They like the grow lights, the LEDs, totally fine. So I think just using what nature does best and just paying attention. And I'm a big fan of observation. And sometimes that common sense comes later. It's just standing there looking at you, and then you're like, oh, gee, that was easy.
Well, common sense isn't nearly as common as the name would indicate, I think. And especially when it's something like that where we're not used to thinking like a mushroom. That makes it that does seem like an obvious solution, but I certainly didn't come to it as you were telling the story.
Yeah.
Interesting. So how did you get into mushroom production in the first place, Tradd?
That's a cool story. The introduction of my book plays it out very well, but I'm going to recite it for everybody because it's an interesting twist of fate. Because as I was in school the first time, and I was down in Charleston, and went back to live with my parents in the interim. And my mom I was taking biology, and my mother knew I was into science. And she goes, there's a mushroom farm out there on Johns Island in South Carolina, which is kind of towards Kiowa, nice resort. And she goes, I hear that they grow medicinal mushrooms, like there's stuff that's good for cancer and things like that. And this is the first I've ever heard, never really paid attention to mushrooms at all, like zero. I knew what a white button mushroom was, because you get those on salads sometimes. Yeah. And I really didn't know anything. So I started studying up about mushrooms. I ordered some supplies, and my mom was very supportive of me trying to grow these white button and maybe portobellos, which are brand new back then, and in the early 90s. And I called up the farm, and I arranged to talk to this guy, and it was really loud, and he was shouting on the phone, yeah, we give tours, you just stop on by. So I went out there and walked in. I could see he was really busy. There was only 2 people working there, and he told me he was growing 1,000 pounds of shiitakes a week. And he walked me through the whole process. He only took a few minutes because he was busy, and he showed me this big sterilizer, and it was just spinning and steaming out, coming out of it, this little room. And he talked to me about the whole process. This is the culture that goes into that machine, and then it goes into bags. Then they'll sit in this room for a little while, called a colonization room. Then they'll get wheeled into this fruiting room. And see, I hadn't seen a mushroom yet. And
right.
And I do the same thing on my tours. I torture people. I talk about the ecology, and I talk about the lab. And by the time you hit the fruiting room, you're just drooling, I guess. you're like, Jesus, where are the mushrooms at? And then I hit the fruiting room, and it's foggy, and there's mushrooms popping out like these blocks all over these racks and all these different spaces and colors, and they were all shiitake mushrooms, and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I've never seen mushrooms growing before, and a lot of people haven't. A lot of people have never seen a mushroom farm, and you should. If you have one near you, ask for a tour, because I think that will be the trigger to get you excited about it. And then the tour was over, and the owner gave me like a little sample bag, and like, hey, try some of these, and thanks for coming by. But during the tour, I remember I was asking him a lot of questions, like, why does it do this? Why does it do that? Or actually making suggestions. And he knew I was a biology student. So I got in my car, and the tour was over, and I was kind of bummed out because it was just like a high of the day, And all my friends were working in card shops and steel mills, and everyone else is flipping burgers and stuff. And I didn't have a job, so I got in the car and getting ready to go back to teaching part time, like a substitute teacher. And so I jump in the car, and I was driving this old Hyundai, that kind of sputtered when you cranked it up, and it was a dirt road, and long dirt road. I get in the car, I cranked it up, and I start driving down this driveway. I mean, a good 30, 50 yards, and there's this big dust cloud behind the car, and I hear this really loud smack, like a pop. I mean, it was really loud, like it shook the car, and I thought I'd popped a tire. And so I stopped the car, and the cloud kind of clears a little bit, and then the owner is standing at my window. I roll down the window, and apparently he had hit the back of my car with his fist, trying to catch me. And this is back before cell phones and pagers.
Right.
Pagers.
Right.
Those are for people who alternative lifestyle. And so he didn't have my number or anything, and I rolled down the window like he was crazy. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's sitting there panting, and he's just like, do you want a job? And I was like, yes. Sometimes you don't think. And I said, yes, I would love to work here. And he goes, well, I can't pay you very much. And I was like, that's fine. I was like, this is amazing. So I stopped teaching, substitute teaching, which is only part-time, and I went to work full-time at the mushroom farm. And so I went from knowing nothing to being like the put into a position of head grower for the facility, within 48 hours.
Wow.
And but I had studied a little bit about it, and the funny thing is, the icing on the cake was, had my car, and I joke about it all the time, had I had a nicer car, with a little bit more oomph to it, that guy might not have caught me. Right? So I want to thank my dad for getting me that Hyundai at this moment. Even though when he gave it to me, I wasn't excited about it. But now I look back and had I missed, or had I've driven away and not received that tap, I probably wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing. I could have went another direction. I may not have went back to school. I wouldn't have written a book. I wouldn't be helping others realize their dream. And I think that's just profound. I think it's really cool, and I love that story.
Tradd, you mentioned helping others, and I think it's something that really comes out in your writing and in your speaking is just how much of a true believer you are in the power of mushrooms to feed and to heal the world.
Oh yeah, and the evidence is there, and I've been described as a mushroom evangelist, and I'll accept that. But there is a lot of truth and science behind the protein and the medicinal properties of these fungi. So it's not voodoo, and it's not snake oil. And I think a lot of products kind of fall into that trap. You see stuff online, and you never really know who to believe, right? I mean, you see, well, cranberries will fight this, or pomegranates will do this, and it's a lot of blogging going on. But whenever I open my mouth, I try to base it on the evidence. There are peer-reviewed journals, and mushrooms are a very good source of protein. They're grown very quickly. There's strains of oyster mushrooms that have adapted to just about everywhere on the planet, except for extreme cold environments. So they can feed the planet. And some of the other parallels are that fungi are really good at mycoremediation, which is the second part of the book. They are good at disassembling things. That's what they do, is they're decomposers. So they decompose a lot of our pollution, a lot of our environmental contaminants that we make. So that's why I give so much support to the fungi, is because I know that if people understand how much they do for us and how much what we can do for them, we need to help them help us. And if we understand more about fungi, how to grow them and incorporate them more into our landscapes and in our yards or on brownfield sites, they're going to help us out. There's a lot to be learned from the fungal kingdom. We just got to pay attention. And I love sharing that information, and I love exploring that. And that's what our business is about.
Well, right. You said the business is about selling the mushrooms to fund the research about how to accomplish these other tasks.
Right. And, at this moment, we're not growing a lot. Sure. I mean, I wish we were growing a little bit more, but if I was to grow a lot more, then it would kind of remove myself from the, research side. And, we're getting ready to ramp up here and grow more mushrooms for the market to generate additional income. I mean, that's a fact. But this place has been evolving in the same sense, where, it's like panning for gold. We keep finding stuff out, and we chase those ideas. We do these little mini trials on remediation. We've got filtration units that we fill our old biomass with, and we run contaminated water through the units, with bacteria, which could become handy in other countries as well as here. Sure, I put the focus on Haiti because I've been there, and I went there with the goal in mind of food and cleaning water. And the U.S. has its share of the problems, but I feel that there's other civilizations on the planet that are in dire need of this help, and I think if we experiment on a small scale, like our company does, of the production and then the filtration using the spent waste, how can we get the most out of fungi, out of that original culture that you started with?
So when you talk about this, I mean, the life cycle that you're talking about for the product then becomes that you're growing mushrooms, maybe, an edible strain of oysters, for example, on straw that then you're later using as a filtration tool to clean up bacteria in the water. Is that an example of the kind of process you're talking about?
That's right on the head. And so we're using, we're fruiting mushrooms first on the media, and then we can pack it into, even nursery buckets, the black nursery pots that sometimes landscapers or farmers use, and let those kind of gel back together. And then if you run water through them, it becomes a micron filter. It'll trap E. coli, and we're working with the university here, Clemson, to eventually turn those filters into cholera filtration devices, because cholera sticks to chitin, and mushroom mycelium, or that fungus, is made of chitin. So it's kind of a very simple, what I like to call very romantic, easy solution that we just have to put together. And it's very primitive and basic and easy, and anybody can do that. So, we were in meetings yesterday with the university here, Clemson Engineering for developing countries. And we're working on brand new mushroom filters that can be taken to Haiti and also possibly to India, where there are tons of herbicides in the water. I mean, you can't even drink the water in some of the wells in India. So everything's polluted, and everyone, the people that drink the well water are getting sick. So it's a good opportunity to set up a mushroom farm in every little village that can not only produce mushrooms, but also to generate the waste that can be used by the villagers to purify the water.
And So if you're using mycelia to pull herbicides out of the water, what happens to the herbicide? I mean, is that then something that, I wouldn't want to take that and spread that out on my field again, would I?
Well, that's the thing, is they're not taking up the herbicide. They are disassembling it. So they're actually cleaning that water and cleaning the straw and everything. You're not left with, even the mushrooms that are edible or the fruit off of that media are going to be edible. So, and that's the magic part we've talked about. A lot of people try to call my business Magic Mountain or Magic Mushroom, but mushrooms are really magical. They are, they have the ability, they have these enzymes, external enzymes that they sweat into the environment, and they're like chemical keys. And if you visualize pesticides like Legos, it's put together in a certain way. These keys that mushrooms produce can pull these Legos, these molecules apart, and make them smaller and smaller and smaller until it's not an herbicide anymore. And then the bacteria get involved, and then they break it down into smaller, smaller, smaller. So if you leave fungi and bacteria together, let's say in a puddle of herbicide, with the media, if you leave it there for 12 weeks, you will get herbicide degradation up to 90% in just that amount of time. We are working on systems that can filter herbicides out of water at the tune of 100 gallons a day. And that's enough for a village. That's enough for a very small village, 100 gallons a day, if it needs to be drinking water. And you can boil herbicide water, and it's still toxic. But if you pour that, and we're trying to figure out the contact time, like how much time does that herbicide water need to come into contact or stay, or flow through that spent mushroom waste to bring it down to safe drinking levels. And all this is ongoing. We've got prototypes. We've got the university involved to do the testing, and we're doing beam tests, and they're going to run it through the LC, which is a liquid chromatographer. And those are the kind of things that are going on behind the scenes here. I talk about them openly, but it's just one of that sides of research that Mushroom Mountain's working on that doesn't pay for itself. And I'm happy to do that, because I want these things to happen. And I guess, people say, well, you sure are passionate. Well, I'm passionate about people. And I'm lucky enough to have been born here and this time and doing what I'm doing. But, when you visit somewhere like Haiti, your whole mindset changes, There's nothing more important than feeding the people, feeding the planet, and giving everybody clean water, and giving everybody a fair shot. And we're all not born that way. But I think mushrooms can help make that happen.
Tradd, we're going to take a moment here for a word from our sponsors. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is sponsored by Vermont Compost. When you talk to Carl Hammer, the company founder, he'll remind you that potting soil is a set of promises about a product that has to do a really hard job, produce a healthy plant in a restricted media volume. When I started farming, I focused on the cheapest ingredients I could get so that I could make my own potting soil. But as my farm grew, and as I saw the challenges that we were having getting great plants out of the greenhouse, I gave it a second look. And I came to the fairly obvious conclusion that success in the greenhouse depends on the success of the plants that are growing there, and that just like in the rest of farming, especially organic farming, that success rests on the stuff that the plant is growing in. The cost of your potting soil isn't insignificant, but it's a small cost relative to plant material, heat, and labor. And if the media fails, the rest of the enterprise is a sunk cost. So get the media that works year after year after year and grow some great transplants. VermontCompost.com. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is brought to you by Farmigo CSA Management Software, providing the tools you need to manage your CSA business. Farmigo CSA Management Software is designed from the ground up to manage the CSA you operate, from customer sign-up right through delivery. Farmigo staff will work with you to customize the dashboard for your farm based on the way your CSA works. System setup is free, and the system can be configured for a wide variety of CSA models, from the traditional box plan right through fully modifiable boxes. On the customer side, Farmigo offers a portal for members to sign up, make payments, and access their account to manage vacation holds and site changes, all with the control by the farm over what can be changed and when the changes can be made. On the farmer side, you can send fully customizable confirmation emails and auto responses and generate reports to help you manage everything from harvest and loading the truck right through delivering the CSA shares. And they offer amazing customer support to you at no charge. They'll even call you if you need help. Learn more at csamanagementsoftware.com. And now back to the show with Tradd Cotter.
You have something that you mentioned in an email to me that sounded really fascinating, this personalized antibiotic research that you're doing.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that's come out of our lab so far. And it's one of those ideas that I can't even believe it's happening. It's just I get goosebumps and I get choked up when I talk about it on stage because it's very disruptive. And when you look at, if you were to take a poll, let's say of 100 people on the street, that's not a very good poll, by the way.
Right.
Let's say you take a poll of 1,000 people, and I want you to say, are you pleased with the medical system or your health care? What do you think the results would be?
Oh, I'd give you 2 people that would give you a favorable rating.
Right, and it's probably somebody who works for the hospital system or something.
That's right.
Is it too? And you see right there that means something's wrong, and everybody knows it's wrong, but nobody's talking about it. It's just we're dealt the cards, we're dealt the hand, and it's basically we have to deal with that. That's what we're given, and to me it feels a lot like handouts. And I talked about this openly in Colorado at the Telluride Mushroom Festival. And I don't like that feeling. I don't like that feeling of not being in control of my own health. Right. And I want to do something about it. So Olga and I had this, glimmer of hope here, or glimmer of light that came through some accidents in the lab. And, I did my fellowship at the EPA, working on some research with cancer cells and different things. And so I had to be away from the farm for weeks at a time. And then I would come back here and I would notice that some of my plates were looking good and some of my Petri plates in the lab were contaminated. And that happens. And this was at my old lab, by the way. So it wasn't very clean. Thankfully, this is like the Hyundai story. And
right.
So I noticed on the plate, I saw a fungus and another mold on a plate. I zipped it up and threw it in the trash, and then I went back to the EPA for another week. And then I came back, and I was checking everything, and I was taking out the trash. And I looked inside the trash, and I saw the plates that I had thrown away in a Ziploc bag. And there was a mushroom attacking another fungus. And this was that kind of that territoriality I was talking about at the beginning of our conversation, where I've learned that I was watching this, I was looking at it, and I started taking pictures. And so I took really nice macro pictures, and I watched the progression of this mushroom attack this other mold and completely carpet bombed it with metabolites, which is the fluid, those little chemical keys that you
right.
saw. And mushrooms just don't do that. They don't produce this sweat in pure culture. They don't do it. So what I was getting a glimpse of, what I figured out was this is the way it works in nature, right? There's 1.5 million fungi on the planet. There's a lot more bacteria, and they're all competing for space. And this is more realistic of what's going on. So I showed that to an advisor over at Clemson, and they basically said, I showed them what I was looking at. I interpreted it to them as a possible way of producing novel fungal metabolites that were specific against whatever it was attacking. And there was silence in the room, and these are the head of the departments over there. They basically said, "Get out of my office and get a lawyer."
Wow.
And I'm like, really? They said, leave, get out of my office, get a lawyer. I don't want to hear anymore. And they were doing that to protect us. And so I figured out, that was 3 years ago, that they were right. And I was right. And now we've got this. So that those first few plates have evolved into, we've created this method. Okay. It's like a vending machine for pharmaceuticals. It's, you've had strep throat. Have you ever had strep throat, Chris?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, I have.
almost everybody does. And I use that as an example. So we now know that 98 people are unhappy with the hospital system out of 100. And so why do we keep going in there? Because we have to, right? We get sick. We take the antibiotics. We don't have a choice. If we go in with strep throat, they're going to give you a culture. They're going to swab it, and they're going to give you an antibiotic that's on the market. And chances are everyone else is taking the same thing. Is that a fair answer?
Yeah, I think that is fair.
That is fair. And even I've had doctors on tours come through here and agree. And the problem is that our health system is treating us like cattle, and we're all given the same thing. Well, there's a high degree of mutation happening amongst bacteria, creating drug resistance. And, antibiotics aren't used all the way, or they're misused. So bacteria are becoming drug resistant in 2.5 years. Period. With a brand new drug, 2.5 years. Well, it takes 12.5 to 15 years to make a new drug, to develop it through the FDA. What we've done, which I think is profound, and again, this is just, I think the first experiment was accidental, but now we're pushing it because we understand it, that we have these little bags, these modules where you can take a throat culture or a biopsy from somebody, let's say with a flesh-eating bacteria. You can have this little bag anywhere in the world, and you inject it through this little port. It goes into the hole. It makes contact with the fungus. It's like the size of a football. And then within 24 to 48 hours, that fungus sweats out, much like it did on the Petri plate, sweats out hundreds of milliliters of patient-specific antibiotics that can be drawn out of another hole and administered to the patient in 24 to 48 hours. And to me, that seems like the way we need to go. And we're doing it with human pathogens like E. coli, strep, staph, candida, and pseudomonas, and some others. But we're also realizing that it could work with agricultural pathogens. So the farmers listening, hey, does anybody listening have a fungal blight or a bacterial blight on their crops? Of course, everyone does.
Yeah.
And what we're finding is that we've got cultures coming in from these universities where they're running out of options, just like the medical industry has. And we're able to produce all these novel metabolites. So it's a huge patent for us. And but again, we're a small company that owns this fascinating piece of intellectual property that we're going to try to make available to the people. And again, you're going back to, well, I am concerned about the state of the health of everybody on the planet and the water. So we're trying to bring it to the people. We're the Robin Hood of the medical industry, hopefully.
Wow.
But I don't know where it's going to take us. A lot of people say, man, this is very powerful. You better get some good help, a lot of money, a lot of help and protection from this, because it could totally disrupt the medical industry and companies that might produce fungicides or herbicides.
That's some really fascinating stuff. That's amazing.
I still haven't realized how crazy it is, but other we've been bombarded by investors and lawyers and everybody's seen it, and everybody's real excited, but they're really nervous at the same time, because it does work. It's starting to work, and nobody wants to see it shelved. So I told them we'll take it to the finish line, and that's what I want. We're kind of an incubator company within ourselves. We take these ideas and we'll experiment. We'll pan around a little bit. It's called bioprospecting. You try a few things, you get a lot of failures in the lab, but hey, every now and then, something works. And a lot of times it's serendipitous, just you notice something that you might have thrown away could turn into something very valuable for humanity, which I think is, that's why I call for more observation in these classrooms.
More time just spent watching stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, walk around any college campus. Sorry, I'm ranting, Chris, but you got, walk around any college campus, and as soon as the bell rings, well, even during class, everybody's texting under the tables and under the desks, and any teacher will tell you that, and even in between class, and nobody's making eye contact. Everybody's looking at their device, and nobody's looking around at what nature's doing. And I think we're going to have a big problem if people don't start looking and observing and adding to the body of the science if we're not just paying attention, because nature is revealing itself. It's done that to me many times in the past few years, and I just happened to be there to catch a glimpse of it. And fungi are fast. The body of the fungus are there in the ground and the mulch, and they only show themselves as a fruiting body or a mushroom for a couple days out of the whole year. And if we're not paying attention, we're not going to be able to see them. We're not going to be able to make that connection. And, I wish that upon everybody. I wish that everyone had that, interest and desire to just kind of walk in the woods and get to know mushrooms more, and just grow a few mushrooms on the side for your family or your neighbors, or start a commercial operation. It doesn't matter, but just get to know mushrooms at a more personal level would be my wish.
So, Tradd, at the end of the show, we always like to do a lightning round of questions with our guests. So, you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, I got a buzzer. Ready? There it is.
All right. I like it. What's your favorite tool on the farm?
Favorite tool? Something that we've made. It's a paddle. And it didn't make it into the book, and it'll definitely be in the next edition. But it's a paddle. It looks like a fraternal paddle, like fraternities use. And it's a wooden paddle, but it has nails all over it, like spikes. It looks medieval. And we use that to hit or pierce bags so they can breathe, the oyster mushrooms bags. So it just makes tiny holes all over the bags without poking big holes. And so the bags can breathe, and the gnats don't get in. The fungus gnats. Oh. And people have seen that, and they're like, that has saved my life in a commercial operation. So the needle paddle has got to be the best tool that I have.
And those are the holes that you're punching in there just for the air circulation, not for the fruiting bodies to come out of.
Right. I go back later and just put a couple slits in, just a few holes, a couple on each side around the bags. But that's really saved a lot. In fact, that I took the paddle home by accident to show somebody at the house, and I left it there for one day, and I didn't paddle these bags. So I told someone here at work, the production manager, I said, listen, can you just go ahead and put the knife holes in there so they can breathe? They should be fine. And that one batch now is full of fungus gnats and little larvae. And so it doesn't take long, and all the other ones are totally fine, even in the same room. No larvae, no fungus gnats. So I'll never not paddle again. Once they colonize the bag, they're resilient. But the fungus gnats got into this batch of pink oyster bags, and they're just having a field day. Just reproducing, and so we're organic. We don't spray, so we just try to use. We try to limit the movement of bugs, and if you limit the movement of bugs, you minimize molds and other things. So it's a very simple solution.
Let me ask a question about the organic thing. Are you guys certified organic?
We are not. We're actually getting certified. I've got most of the paperwork filled out. I think all of it. We're having difficulty locating some of these supplements and grains that are organic, and they're very, very expensive. So we're having to kind of switch our formulas around, and we're trying to breed. We've got some new strains of mushrooms that don't need as much supplementation or grain at all. So it's really just a breeding program here where we're trying to grow exclusively on just sawdust. And it may take a little bit longer, for the mushrooms to fruit, but that's okay. I'm actually on the committee or the board for the certified naturally grown. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so I'm on the board for that committee. It's a new program it may be out this fall, and we've been having meetings all spring and summer. And I think we're pretty close, and it's very similar to the organic program, but not as costly or as prohibitive. So I'll definitely be that certified because we're setting the standards, but I still have to use organic material.
And that would include the substrates that you're growing on. So like if you're doing oyster mushrooms on straw, then it's got to be certified organic straw.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got it.
And so that's one of the challenges. And that's why I would encourage anyone who's wants to be a mushroom grower, who's already growing crops or straw, is to make that transition. I mean, we have property now. I mean, trust me, I think in circular systems, I would love to just contract out or find some property and grow straw just for us, just so I know that we have it, because it's hard to find.
Okay, that's going to be the next big thing in South Carolina for the organic farm movement is straw for trad.
Straw, somebody, or hemp. And we're actually growing on hemp. We've just cultured some hemp yesterday, some waste, it's like hemp bedding, and I bought a couple bales, and we're going to be publishing a paper on growing mushrooms on hemp waste. So that should be out by January.
All right. And what's your favorite crop to grow? I mean, and you can't just say mushrooms.
No.
Like getting specific about it.
What specific mushroom do I like the best?
If you could only grow one mushroom, what would you grow?
Jeez-a-ree. That's trying to pick a favorite child. That's not fair. And
we won't tell them.
I know. That's a good thing I'm not in the fruiting room. God, that's a difficult situation. And out of all the mushrooms I have, I mean, I think the most rewarding is the oyster mushrooms. But I'm going to have to go with something tropical because it's such a cool mushroom. It's called a paddy straw, and it only fruits for us 2 months out of the year, and it's a tropical, and it only fruits above 90 degrees. And so not everybody will get to grow this, or you can only grow it a couple weeks out of the year in cooler climates. But the fascinating thing about this mushroom is that it's a great edible, but it fruits in 4 to 7 days. And to me, that's when we're looking back at how this conversation has unfolded, how people talk about magic mushrooms all the time. That's got to be the most magical mushroom on the planet. For something that's a microbe to use its chemical keys, when you plant it in cotton waste or something like that, and it sweats out the keys and then disassembles that cotton waste, and then it puts it back together in the form of a mushroom in 4 to 7 days. I don't get it, I mean,
that's a pretty amazing turnover time.
That's amazing. And even the oyster mushrooms, I mean, those are fascinating. And see, that was one of my first choices because they're fast. That is amazing. And that's why they're such a pleasure to grow. I mean, I love shiitakes. I love all these others. And every new mushroom is exciting for me to try to grow because I have to figure it out. But nothing can beat the idea that this fungus can break down this organic matter and then reassemble it back into a huge edible mushroom in as little as 4 days. It defies logic is what it is. And that's why I like to think like a mushroom, is because how can they possibly do that? And that's what keeps me fascinated about fungi, is just a mushroom like that doing what it does, and it's selfless. It just does it because it has to do it.
And if you could go back in time and tell your beginning mushroom farmer self one thing, what would it be?
Well, don't get a nicer car. And then, but I appreciate the Hyundai. But I had no idea what I was getting into. Nothing. I mean, I thought that it was going to be just a job right there. But if I was to come back as like a apparition or something and a ghost and tap myself, I would probably say, you have no idea what you're getting into. So, like, hang on for the ride would be my lesson, or talk to myself. And I don't want to, give myself any advice like, well, just stick with it. Because I've kind of kept with it. It's been on and off until I managed to make a living doing this. And a lot of people tell me to give up and sell my lab equipment and do all that stuff. So I would probably say, just don't let anybody tell you not to, just follow that passion and stick with it, and something good will come out of it. But not to give away the secrets to my early self, but just to keep that interest and passion.
I like that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I can't believe that it's evolved into that. That one tap on the car might not have seen this brand new medical breakthrough that everybody can benefit from. That's like the butterfly effect people talk about. It's just weird. And I'm sure that happens all the time, but I'm still not used to it. I'm very humbled by what's happened here. And, I go on tour all the time, and none of this is going to my head because I don't think it can. Fungi are always there to remind me that they're in charge. We're not in charge. Well, we need to find out what they're doing and keep the party going.
Great. Tradd, it's been a lot of fun talking to you today, and I feel like I've learned so much more. I'm about ready to go see if I can find a bale of straw and get something going in the basement here. If people want to find out more information about Mushroom Mountain, where would they look for that?
You can go to myshroommountain.com, all spelled out. That's our website. I'm also, look on the events. We've published since the book came out, and we'll should mention the book. I am being called to conferences everywhere in the country now. So mostly on the East Coast, but I'm getting out to the West Coast. Travel cost is one of the barriers, but if anybody wants me to speak at a conference or a club or anything, it's just the cost of me getting there. And the book is a big help. So the book is Organic Mushroom Farming and Mycoremediation. That's a Chelsea Green publication. And
it's a great book.
I know. It turned out good, and I'm totally unbiased, but it is, the publisher did an amazing job with me editing everything. I turned in 200,000 words, and we distilled it to 150, and it's a cover-to-cover read. And
it's beautiful. It's a beautiful book.
Goodness.
I mean, the full color pictures in it of just the various mushrooms and the other activities around them are just fantastic. Yeah, and most of them are pictures by Olga and myself. And, we take pictures of everything meticulously because that's part of the observation is doing that. And to be able to share that, all those pictures, and you're getting 22 years of mushroom cultivation experience distilled into that 300 pages. And there's a lot of images because I'm a visual presenter. And when you do see me present, like you might remember, there's very little text, right? So very nice.
It allows the reader or person who's watching to just sit back and absorb and learn like a mushroom does. That's how they eat. It's just to sit and absorb and observe. And it starts out very slow and it just ramps right up into the more advanced stuff a little bit later on. So it doesn't. A lot of other guides start with laboratory construction. Well, I don't think that's a smart strategy, is to tell someone in the first chapter or two is to, hey, this is how you construct a lab. Most people can't do it or don't have the money. So I suggest just start with some spawn, start a little mushroom garden, learn from that, and then work your way up.
Tradd, thank you so much for being on the Farmer to Farmer podcast today.
All right. Thank you for everyone for listening. And if you need help, just let me know.
All right. So wrapping things up here, I'll say again that this is episode 30 of the Farmer to Farmer podcast, and that you can find the notes for this show at farmertofarmerpodcast.com by looking on the episodes page, or just searching for Cotter. That's Cotter. Hearing loss is cumulative, which means that you lose a little bit of your hearing each time you expose yourself to noises that are too loud for your ears. And because I want you to be able to listen to this podcast for years to come, I want to make sure you've got your ears protected while you are out doing your fall tractor work this year. And if you can listen to the podcast while you're doing it, that's all the better. My favorite solution for listening to audio while doing work that requires ear protection is the Peltor 2600N noise isolating earbuds. They do a great job of keeping the loud sounds out and the good sounds in. And because they stick right in my ear instead of going over my head like larger on-ear models, I can still wear my Shady Brady straw hat, keeping my head cool and my skin healthy while I'm protecting my hearing at the same time. Plus, if you go through farmertofarmerpodcast.com/earbuds to get a pair, it helps to support the show. If you enjoy the podcast, I think you would also enjoy my weekly email newsletter, The Flying Rutabaga. The Flying Rutabaga runs the gamut from practical templates for delegation to guidelines for watering transplants. You can sign up at farmertofarmerpodcast.com or purplepitchfork.com. And if you enjoy the show, it would be great if you would pop on over to iTunes and leave us a review or make a comment on the show notes or tell your friends on Facebook. These reviews and referrals are the bread and butter of making this show available to an ever wider group of listeners. And one more thing, if you've hung on this long, I'd like to know what questions you have that my guests or I might be able to answer in the podcast. I'd also like to know what guests you'd like to hear on the podcast. Please let me know on Facebook at Purple Pitchfork or use the contact page on farmertofarmerpodcast.com. Anything or anyone about farming and farm life is fair game. Keep weathering the weather, be safe out there, and keep the tractor running.